Great. Thanks a lot for the introduction. And yeah, maybe first of all, big thanks to Venturesquare for the invitation to speak here. I apologize, I don't do it in Korean. It's a bit rusty, so hope you don't mind. I'm sticking to English. And yeah, maybe to start, I'm quite excited really to be here because this is my second time in Seoul, and I've been here a year ago, and I was really quite impressed with the quality of the founders and the startups. And so, yeah, really exciting to be back, and looking forward to meeting a lot more great entrepreneurs throughout the day and after this presentation. Maybe before I kick it off, can I see a quick show of hands? Who's a founder in the room? Any entrepreneurs? Can you stick the hands up? Okay, it's a couple. Okay, so hopefully that's relevant. Speak to me afterwards. And then I'm gonna do one thing before we start, if you don't mind. I'm gonna take a selfie. That's pretty cool. All right, smile everybody. Woo! Great. For my Twitter account. Okay, so before I start talking about startup trends, you know, the topic of this presentation, let me very briefly talk about the fund I work with, which is Cherry Ventures. Cherry Ventures is a Berlin-based fund. You might have seen them in the news beginning of the year. It's a fund started by 3 former entrepreneurs, Philip, Daniel, and Christian. And yeah, where they really stand out is that they've all been previously successful entrepreneurs. They started companies like Quandu, CityDeal, or Zalando, which is now a pretty big or 10 billion market cap listed company. And all 3 partners really try to leverage the operational experience with their investments. What are we looking for? Well, we're looking for breakthrough ideas and founders that really have the courage to make those ideas or to turn those ideas into really big companies. We invest primarily in Europe, even though actually looking at the map, I should have highlighted Korea in here as well, because you know we can invest outside Europe as well. So definitely speak to me after this. And we're primarily investing in consumer technologies. Includes things like obviously marketplaces, but also SaaS if it's not enterprise sales. Yeah, startup trends. Maybe before I go into the first slide, yeah, funnily enough, beginning of the year I've been in the Valley, and there was a lot of chat around possible bubble or a lot of media news around funding environment drying up, and you know, now 11 months later, I think what's become quite clear is that the funding environment really remains quite strong. Obviously, there's been a small dip compared Q3 this year versus Q3 last year, but overall, I think the trend is quite clear, which is, you know, there's more and more capital, and then funding environment remains strong. Mainly, yeah, driven by the US, followed by Asia, and a majority investments in internet and mobile sector. Now, when you look across Europe, what's interesting is that the big tech companies that we've seen emerging over the last couple of years are really spread across different cities and different countries in Europe. So it's not just one hub, but it's really across different countries. And I think this is a function of, one, more capital spread across different countries, but B, also really a function of more and more platforms which generate successful founders, and so the trickle-down effect of those platforms creating new companies. And I have a couple examples here. I think a good example is Skype, which I'm sure you're all familiar with in Estonia. And Estonia is a very small country with only 3 or 4 million people, but the success of Skype has created a whole new wave of successful founders and entrepreneurs, starting from Atomico to TransferWise Yeah, and then you have the same examples in Sweden and in the UK. In Germany, obviously, you have Zalando and Rocket that, again, created a whole new wave of successful founders. A quick look at the public markets. And what's interesting here is that for the first time, the 5 biggest valued companies in the world are tech companies. And what's also interesting is that there's really a trend of continuous investments from both non-tech and tech companies into innovation and tech businesses. The non-tech companies invest to not get disrupted, and the tech companies invest to stay on top of the game. So it really boils down to, either you get disrupted or you're the disruptor. So I think we will see continuously more and more investments in technology as a general trend. And all of this obviously leads into an acceleration of more and more unicorns, so companies that are valued above $1 billion or big businesses over the last couple of years. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of logos here, and this is definitely a trend we'll probably see increasing. Yeah, industry trends. So this is actually a bit of summary of trends that were listed beginning of the year by VCs and industry experts as to what they thought, the hot sectors of 2016 were. And you see a lot of buzzwords up there: blockchain and drones and VR and AI. And we could probably talk, for hours and hours about each of those separate sectors. I've actually picked a couple of those which I want to maybe talk in a bit more detail. And the first one is artificial intelligence or AI. I saw the AlphaGo logo in the previous presentation, so if I'm repetitive here, then please tell me. But I think my key messages around this slide is really, we see more and more investments in AI. I think it's fair to say that we're moving into an AI-first world. Obviously, the AlphaGo victory against Lee Sedol was a manifestation of that. And by the way, I'd love to chat with you guys about how this match was perceived here in Korea. I would love to get more insights on that. I think maybe a couple of more critical words or a different perspective around AI is that obviously now a lot of things are labeled AI. If you go to a demo day, every company is AI focused. Very often when you dig a little bit deeper and you go into underneath the surface, what you'll see is that a lot of things that are AI labeled often end up being a sequence of if formulas and are not really AI in that classic sense. So not everything what is titled AI really is AI. That's one thing. And then the other point I want to mention here is that AI per se is obviously not a sector, right? So it's obviously more of an accelerator in specific sectors like fintech or travel, and so always needs to be seen in conjunction with those sectors. The second trend I want to speak a bit about is unbundling. A bit messy slide here, apologies for that. But what you see are free websites, a bank, a hotel, and a freight forwarder. And what's interesting about unbundling, maybe we'll pick the example of the bank here for a second, is that 5 or 10 years ago, the bank was really taking the whole spectrum of the consumer experience around money. Everything you were doing with money, the bank had a a fair share in it. And now what you see is all those different parts being taken from startups. If you look at the bank, starting from mortgages, savings account, remittance, investments, all those separate parts of that value chain that the bank was capturing is now taken by startups. Obviously with a completely different mindset, which is not what's the maximum I can charge a customer, but actually the startups go about it differently. They ask what's the minimum I can take from a customer. A and B, obviously with a lot better user experience and user interface. So a completely different mindset, and I think we'll see this unbundling trend across all sectors with really specialized startups. Yeah, last trend, which is also a bit sector agnostic, but I think is worth talking about, is just the focus around product. And that's great for all the consumers, because there's really a regular kind of focus on building great products and building great customer experiences. And again, sector agnostic, but I think what's important is that by just focusing on a better customer experience, you can build big businesses. You don't necessarily need to come up with completely innovative or crazy new ideas or new sectors. You can compete with the gorillas and the established businesses by simply building a good customer experience and a good product. Investors, they get it wrong all the time. I'm not sure if you've seen these before, but those are actually rejection emails from Brian Chesky, the CEO and founder of Airbnb, back in 2008 when he raised his first million. And I'm sure all the VCs that wrote those emails, they're either out of a job or they're seriously depressed about the fact that they didn't invest, because, as we all know, Airbnb became quite successful. But if you read some of those commentaries where VCs claim that travel is a wrong category, or they don't believe in the business model, and as we all know, Airbnb now hosted over 60 million guests and raised over $3 billion. And I almost want to finish on that note, which is investors get it wrong all the time. And to all the founders that raised their hand here before and then that are in the room, maybe I guess my key message is don't necessarily follow what's perceived a hot trend or a hot sector, but build businesses where you think you're solving a customer problem and where you believe in the vision, irregardless of what VCs say or what might be hot trends or hot sectors. Thank you very much.